have this conversation. Welcome back to Race Talk Revolution, where your voice matters. I am your host and founder of Race Talk Revolution Incorporated, Reverend Lane Cobb. I'm here today with my co-host, AJ Woodson, editor-in-chief of Black Westchester Magazine and co-host of People Before Politics Radio. AJ was up last night celebrating with the Democrats in White Plains, New York. I am going to do a lot of the talking right now, but he is with us. Thank you, brother, for all the work that you do at Black Westchester. Today, we are unpacking what it means to have a unified anti-racist identity and how individuals and communities and organizations can coalesce around a clear and powerful voice for actions that address racism in our society. Our speakers today are Reverend Joseph Barndt and Nathan Trice of the Anti-Racist Coalition for Faith, Ethical, and Spiritual Communities, which is an organization associated with PISAB, the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond, which originated what many consider to be the flagship of anti-racism education, the Undoing Racism Workshop. Reverend Joseph Barndt is a 30-plus year core trainer with PISAB and the co-founder of the Anti-Racist Coalition of Faith, Ethical, and Spiritual Communities. Nathan Trice is the organizer consultant for the Anti-Racist Coalition. He is a trainer in training with PISAB and co-founder of ACRE, Artists Co-Creating Real Equity, which is an affinity group of PISAB. Today's program will be a little different. Usually we interview our speakers and field questions from you, the audience, but today we're going to be asking for your participation. So once we set up the topic, we're going to turn the mic over to Joe and Nathan, and they're going to lead the conversation from there. And having said that, when you aren't speaking, please do remain muted. Let me say, just before we begin, that although our speakers do work primarily in faith-based organizations, that is not everything that they do. And as individuals committed to creating a world that works for everyone, where every person is valued and appreciated, and where equity and equality are the rule rather than the exception, it is really important that we learn how to communicate with each other. We have to collaborate effectively. And in order to do that, we have to have a common language. We have to all be on the same page. And so when that doesn't happen, we end up spinning our wheels. And I'm clear that we have some organizers on this broadcast today that have experienced that. So today we are going to have a conversation about that. What does that look like? What does that mean? And we're going to ask you guys to really look at your individual and collective experiences as organizers and people who are committed to creating a world that works for folks, okay? So before I turn over the mic, I remind you that Race Talk Revolution is a safe space for people of all backgrounds to share their ideas and opinions. And even when we don't agree with what's being shared, we listen with empathy and patience, and we practice radically inclusive love, because here on Race Talk Revolution, every voice matters. And let me turn it over. Gentlemen, welcome Joseph Barndt, Nathan Trice. Take it away.
Good morning, everybody. I'm wondering how many people we have been in the room with us.
Right now, we have 23, so about 20 folks, Joe, besides the four of us.
Okay, and are we going to be able to see each other?
We can, just a moment. Actually, Joe, you can do that and adjust your view. Let's see if adjusting my view helps you. Does it?
No, I just see the I see four people.
So go up to the top of the screen on the right-hand side, Joe, and see where it says view, hit view, and then hit the word gallery.
There we are. There we are. Now I can say good morning, everybody. It's good to be with you. And it's good to be sharing with Lane and with, I'm sorry, AJ. And we have a very short amount of time to do a lot of things, so I want to move very quickly into it. And one of the things that Lane has been emphasizing, and we want to really emphasize today, is the need for a common understanding of racism if we're going to do anything about it. And if we have 30 definitions of racism, we'd be fighting each other for 30 different solutions. So we're going to start by getting everybody to have a chance to get their voice in the room and get a chance to do some sharing. I'd like to have you think about for a second, what would be your one sentence definition of racism? Some people call it an elevator speech. You're in an elevator with somebody and you're going one floor with them, and they want to know what this meeting about racism you're going to, and you have one floor on the elevator to say one sentence and communicate what racism is. So I'd like to see what happens if we try and do that. Let me ask you to do something. Take a pencil and piece of paper if you got one, and just make a note to yourself what that one phrase or sentence would be. Not a paragraph, not a long thesis, not your PhD thesis, but what would be a definition, a one sentence definition of racism that would communicate to the best of your ability what racism is. So I'll give you a second to jot down a note so that you have something to read from when we go around. And I'm going to have a little trouble with names because the print is too small. But so if I mispronounce your name, blame it on NBC.
So Joe, do you want people to raise their hand and share? Is that what you'd like them to do?
Yeah, since I can't see everybody's names, I think.
And that's okay, Nathan, you can manage that, right?
Well, basically, I'll call on folk, you know.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Terrific, terrific, thank you. Yeah, just let us know how you want us to participate, guys.
Okay, so let's go around the room and see how many one sentence definitions of racism we can get up here. Nathan,
Can I get how about Jim? Would you like starting us off, Jim Russell?
Okay, the sentence I wrote down was, racism is the belief that one race is better than another.
Wonderful. Great, very clear, very concise, one sentence. I love it, Jim. Thank you. How about is that Cody Kirkham?
Mine was almost the same. Seeing one race as superior to any other.
Wonderful. Thanks, Cody. What about Neil? Can't hear you, Neil.
Helps if I take it off mute.
Okay.
A negative opinion or judgment of someone based solely or primarily upon their race.
Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it. How about, is that Myrna Beckford?
Yes, I have attitudes and damaging actions towards a group of people whose race you do not want to include.
Thank you, Myrna.
attitude,
PJ Jones. Did I see it?
I put not looking at everyone as one and equal.
Not looking at everyone as one. Okay, wonderful, PJ. How about is it Tanya?
Tanya.
Sorry, Tanya.
No, it's fine, as long as I'm called to dinner. Systemic, structural, cultural ways that enforce white bodies as humans and others are not.
Thank you. How about Tina?
I put down a system that makes it harder for people to access opportunities based on perceived skin color.
Could you say that again?
I wrote a system that makes it harder for people to access opportunities based on perceived skin color.
Okay, good, thank you.
If you haven't gone, it'd be great if you could put your hand up so I can know who's gone. But I'm going to go for Robin next.
I was about to put my hand up. I have racism is the systemic oppression of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color by white people.
Okay. Erica.
Hi. Racism is the structural system that has been set up to deny Black folks and people of color equal access and equity.
Thank you, Erica. Joan.
Racism is bias against a group based on race, and which includes a power differential.
Is it Sandra or Sandra?
Sandy, you're muted. Nathan, come back to Sandy after she can unmute. Let's go to.
Sandy, you're
Okay. Maria.
Oh, unmute. I put that as the actions of supporting our systems of education, healthcare, which benefit whites over people of color.
Okay, thank you, Maria. Edward Fry.
How did you pronounce my name?
Reed.
My definition is the use of power consciously or unconsciously to benefit white people and oppress Black people.
Hey, Eddie, good to see you. Barbie.
Well, racism is racial prejudice and the abuse of power by those who have control. There's a definition I saw on Who We Are that I kind of like too. That is, racism is prejudice plus social power plus legal authority.
Good to see you, Barbie. Thank you.
Nathan, Dina's had her hand up for a little while.
Right. Go ahead. Is that Adina? You're muted.
Inherent superiority based on skin color.
Thank you, Adina. Did we hear from Lourdes?
It's been said, but it's prejudice plus power equals racism. Prejudice for all people of color. Against.
Thank you, Lourdes. Wonderful. Did we hear from Gretchen?
Not until now.
Righty.
Racism is the systemic oppression of people of color based in white supremacy.
Okay. Sandra, did we get something from? Oh, there we go.
Something like, a social arrangement of institutions that maintain white authority and power over people of color.
Okay. Good. How about Paul?
I'd say the same as a few others. It's racial prejudice plus power.
Okay. Neil.
I had making a negative opinion or judgment of someone based solely or primarily upon their race.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Neil. Leah.
Systems of power which determine that one ethnic group is inferior to others and less deserving of services.
Thank you, Leah. Tina.
I did go.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so is that Marjorie?
Marjoie.
Marjoie, sorry about that.
And she may not be able to unmute. Marjoie, if you can unmute, that's great. Maybe we can get.
Phil?
Yep, Phil, and I think Marla.
And I don't think Erica would either. I don't remember Erica going.
I did.
Oh, okay.
Phil, did
Thank
you have a
you.
response on that question?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Nathan. Racism is a system that exploits a group of people based on their skin color.
Thank you, Phil.
And we have Marla and we have Amber.
All right, Marla, it's on you. And you said who else? Amber?
Amber, and they might not be able to unmute. Amber, can you unmute today? Okay, maybe not. And anybody who wants to put an answer into the chat, we can share it for you, all right? So the chat is open, letting you know that.
Everybody gone? Anybody hadn't gone that want to go? All right. What do you think, Joe?
Well, it's a really wonderful collection of if you totaled them all up to you'd have the beautiful description of racism. One of the things that I do when I listen to people talking about their definition of racism is listen for the verb. Whether people might say it's a belief system, or might say it's a way of seeing people, or it's a way of feeling. When we put a verb about the kind of action of seeing racism or believing about racism, then it's going to lead us into a definition of response to it, whether the response is changing beliefs or feelings or I think that one of the things that happens in the majority, my experience, majority of people responding to a definition of racism is that they're usually individual responses. Usually the beliefs or feelings of individuals, and then if you ask the question, how do you begin to deal with that? You end up dealing with individual responses. Several of you started off your definition with the word system, systemic. And that's really something that's really happened very recently, probably just since the George Floyd murder. People are more and more talking about systemic racism and changing of systems. And I think that is just really an excellent transition. And it's something that we really need to build on. That it starts by looking at systems, not at individual people. And just look at that list listen to that list again that you just heard from each other, and share what kind of actions that you see are necessary to undo the racism that you just described. What's the action that's needed?
And Joe, when they're sharing back, do you want them to be able to have a little more space, meaning that a sentence or two?
Yes.
Okay. Just so we have so many people here, we want to give everybody time to sort of respond. So
what kind of action is required to counter the definition that you put up?
Gretchen started it off in the chat with the word revolution.
Okay.
And don't be shy, folks.
One of the things we got to do is definitely speak up about it, though. So, so let's hear your voices, folks. Go ahead, Maria.
Sorry, it takes a while to unmute. I had said that racism is the action of supporting the systems, and I think one of the easiest systems to change, but people would object to it, is the way we fund our schools. We do it on real estate values. So if you live in a fancy neighborhood and the taxes are high, the kids get $30,000 per student, whereas in the poorer areas it's 18. And all of those taxes should go to one central place and fund the schools based on their need first, and then the number of their students second.
Thank you.
And how would that be how would that be from your point of view a systemic change?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because the schools, it's systemic because everybody would be taking part in it by paying their taxes. But the real thing is that everybody would get the similar education, and the kids living in poorer neighborhoods would still get not only the education with the good teachers, but all of the extracurricular things that the kids in the wealthier areas get. You know, good phys ed, counseling, whatever else they have in the schools that are not in the poor neighborhoods. Does that answer the question?
It begins to get it. It's I think the one thing that I would want to add to that is that you've decided quite accurately, I think, that education is a system.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that makes a big. I'm going to come back to that, because understanding the nature of systems and institutions. Some of you, when you gave your definition, you spoke about power, systemic power. And so the question is, how does power get expressed through systems? And how do you isolate and look at different systems differently? And so I really like the fact that you identified education as a system. Some more.
I think racism affects all our systems and all our institutions. And there are many people who are willing to be educated. And there are people who are not willing to be educated. And I don't have any answers, but I think unless we recognize that all systems are affected, and I agree everything that was said about the educational system, but tackling one system is excellent, but doesn't do it across the board. And even across the board, if all systems were attempted to be tackled, there are many people who don't want to hear it. So how do we get to people? And on a more personal level, I think bringing our awareness to as many people as possible in whatever ways we can is helpful.
Very good. Some more.
AJ, we've got some stuff in the chat. You want to share what's in the chat?
So we have Sandy Barnaby, educate the system players to have common definition and strategy for change. Phil wrote, educate people about the persuasiveness of racism, then struggle against it. Gretchen wrote, and if we are talking education, we need to also have to change how we teach and what we teach. Neil wrote, eliminate redlining and redistricting. Robin wrote, she just said they all had their hands raised. I'm sorry.
No, I
That wasn't a
got it.
comment. Yeah.
That's okay. Eddie says, listen, tell me more, and listen. Erica says, dismantle, organize, and protest. And Marilla says, acknowledge and heal. So those are in the chat. And Amber had her hand up. I don't know. I think she might have fallen off again.
Oh no, I'm still here. I was actually trying to make it to the next door before you called on me, because it is kind of loud out here. So actually, I wanted to piggyback off of what the lady before me had said about education. Yes, it's systemic, and so it's in every part of our institutions. But I think if we start off with kids who are eventually going to become adults and are going to be the next generation, I think we'll have better chances of this filtering out versus trying to change the mind of grown adults who, if they don't know by now that racism is bad, I don't think there's a lot that's going to change their mind. But I wouldn't teach it in a way that assumes anything. Like, I think we're always trying to teach kids, okay, we have to be nice to people, we have to tolerate people. You know, look at all our similarities. That's the best thing about us, is we're all similar. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think what should be focused on is we're different. And that is okay. That is fine that, you know, your culture, you eat different fruit than I do. It's okay that your belief in multiple gods versus my single God is okay, and unique and beautiful. So I think if we focus on the interpersonal skills of young children as they grow older, we might not even have this discussion about race at all.
Thank you, Amber. Nathan, Tanya, and Adine have their hands up.
They can go for it, Tanya.
I kind of go with Dr. Kendi that if we change policy, then opinion will change. And so I think that the place to go, especially when we're talking about structure and system, that it has to come from policy. Policy, of course, is made by what? The government, and government is made by what? The people voting.
Who else was that had a hand up?
Adine and now Leah.
Go for it, Leah, or Adine, either one.
Adine.
All right. I see the major problem being the large number of Americans, predominantly white, who are clinging to white domination. There are even Democrats who say the good words, who speak the language of conciliation, but when you come right down to it, do not want to give up the power they have in white dominance. And until that is chipped away and challenged at every level, economic, medical, educational, housing, it has to be chipped away at in every aspect of our society.
One of the things that I think is important to put into discussion at this point is the difference between a system and an institution. Institutionalized racism, like institutionalized anything, is designed to repeat a process over and over again without having to reinvent it. The institutionalized processes are automatic and they're done for us so that we don't even have to think about them to participate in them. There's a sense in which all of us are enslaved to systems because they act in our name whether we want to or not. But the difference between a system and an institution is that there are according to, depends on your sociological position, but there's something like 15 to 20 basic systems that are operational in a modern society. And each one, actually, let me pause there for a second and see how many of those 15 to 20 we could name. We've already named the education system. What other systems are there?
Healthcare.
What was that again?
Healthcare.
Healthcare. And some people divide that up into mental health and physical health, but healthcare.
The criminal injustice system.
The criminal injustice.
Injustice system.
Criminal injustice.
Wealth acquisition.
Now that's a little too general for me. Wealth acquisition as a system.
Capitalism.
Bank
So,
loans.
so basically the economic system.
Economic system, yes.
Housing.
Economic, housing. Somebody's already mentioned some of the things about housing.
Voting.
How is that a system?
Keeping black and brown representation low.
So we would call it the political system. I was
Okay, the political structure, the political system. That's good.
Environment.
And that's one of the newest ones.
Religion.
Religion is a system.
Yes.
Transportation.
Transportation is a system. And some people put that together with communication. I like to keep it separate. Transportation is a system and communication and media is a system.
Media, yeah.
Culture and social norms.
That I think of that as existing and weaving through all of the systems, and it's not a system in itself, but a means by which systems are organized and express themselves. So we'll come back to culture. But I think that's about 13. There's some that we're missing.
Education has already been mentioned, right?
Education was at the top of the list.
Mm-hmm.
What about labor?
How about corporate control?
All of them are corporate. Corporate's another word for systemic.
I think labor's would be a system in Heather McGee's book. She has a whole chapter on unions, which I had never thought about before. So
there's a broader concept of the means of production and distribution of the goods of a society, of which labor is a significant portion of that. But I tend to put labor as a part of the means of production.
Is entertainment a system?
Absolutely.
Police and military.
And
police and military, is that what you said, Phil? Who said that?
Phil.
I did.
Okay, yeah.
That's very good. We already had the criminal injustice system that includes the police, but it's important to recognize that military is a system that is related to that.
Is anything about agriculture a system?
I was going to say that. Yeah.
That's part of the. I put that as part of the means of production and distribution. The food is very important piece of that.
Okay.
I think when we say police, it has to mean that more than just the criminal aspect or what they do in terms of criminals, the whole system. I mean, police can be good and are thought of as good in white neighborhoods very often and as protective. So I might be nitpicking, but I think we need to consider that.
Say more about that.
Well, we attempt to have a justice system and police often fail in that regard. But I think the whole issue of do we fund the police or defund the police, whatever, police need to behave differently, whether we have more or fewer of them. So I wouldn't label it. If we're doing a labeling thing, I wouldn't label it as, I wouldn't narrow the label, I guess that's what I mean. I do think the police is a whole system. And I wouldn't call it, and I just wouldn't call it just the criminal aspect of
the criminal justice system includes police, includes courts, includes prisons, includes a very broad list of things that you would need to include in that. But I hear you saying that we need to be clear about our distinctions in that regard.
I'd like to add this. The police are a reflection of the communities they come from. And for many or most white policemen, they exist to protect whites and control non-whites.
I think you need to look at what's the product of this system. The product of this system is criminals, people labeled as criminals who are punished. That's what the system does, whether it's a white collar crime or it's somebody on the street. The product of the system is criminals. That's what they create. That's why it's called the criminal justice system.
Another system is immigration.
I want to stay with the criminal justice comments for a second, because I think it's very important to hold up the criminal justice system is supposed to be a positive creation, and it ends up creating criminals. And I think that's a very, very wise statement. But we need to go a whole lot deeper to knowing how the pieces of the criminal justice system interrelate to each other. Actually, let me pause a second here and just talk about systemic injustice. Each one of these systems that you named is filled with thousands and tens of thousands of individual institutions. If every school is an institution, every school system, every school, every university, every kindergarten, they're all part of. I'm sorry. The education system is made up of all of the schools and seminaries and universities and each one of these systems is filled with thousands, literally hundreds of thousands of institutions. Each one of them is a part of a system. Systemic change is when all of them when all of them begin to change, and it creates a wave that relates to the change is happening on a cross system basis. But to get to that, we have to understand how systems come into being. There's a sentence I'd like to say, and sometimes I repeat it ask people to memorize it. That is that every system and every institution in this country was created originally and structured legally and intentionally to serve white people exclusively. You have to go back to the very foundation of a system and see that each system was created to serve white people exclusively. And so that so that it's not just a matter of them serving people of color badly, it's that they were designed not to serve them at all. And up until the civil rights movement, these systems in this country were designed to serve white people exclusively, and were not allowed to serve people of color. So they were designed to serve white people exclusively. And then in the civil rights movement, one of the great accomplishments of the civil rights movement is that systems and institutions were required by law to go to people of color communities and to serve them. And so in the 70s and the 80s, for the first time in the history of this country, systems were thinking about how to intentionally serve people of color. But they went to people of color, communities of color, to serve them, but they went without changing the design. And so white systems serving people of color communities still resulted in having systems still not adequately able to serve people of color. And so go down every one of these 15 to 20 systems and look at how it serves since the civil rights movement. It's present in communities of color, serving communities of color, but they still serve in ways that do not meet the needs of people of color, and to become means of controlling people of color rather than means of serving. Does that communicate? Respond to what I just said, whether that communicates.
Yes, Joe, you've got a lot of thumbs up. People nodding, yes.
And systems, systemic change does not happen by going to systems and saying, let's change the system. Systems do not have constitutions and bylaws. Institutions have constitutions and bylaws. You change systemic racism one institution at a time. And when sufficient change takes place within institutions, it creates the system itself begins to shift and change. But the focus of organizing for change begins within individual institutions. So you don't say change the police system. You go to individual police departments, and you can trace, for example, what's happened in the Minneapolis police institution since the murder of George Floyd. And that is the traceable change. But then you go to every individual community in this country that has its own police institution, and you need to cross over institutions into systems to begin to get systemic change.
So, Joe, Cody has her hand up, maybe with a question. I just want to give a shout out. You know, one of the things about this Race Talk community is we're all pretty savvy, right? We understand. Thank you for reiterating what you're saying. We're with you. And Cody has a question. Nathan, is it okay?
Well, Joe, how are you feeling? Are you complete with that, Joe? Did you want to?
But let's hear what Cody has to say.
Okay.
Yes, my question was, could you talk about imposing a way of being on a system from above versus interpersonal? I mean, I think that from my vantage, it's really important to know people who are different from me in all regards, religions, race, gender, sexual identity, all those ways, before I want to step forward. If something is imposed from on top that we're going to change the system, does it work as well as? It's hard to change people's hearts. Just changing systems, or tell me more about that.
Changing people's hearts is a piece of it, but systems don't run on hearts. They've got the full body on all the organs, not just hearts. They've got, and so that it's not just, we have to change people's acceptance of how systems function, but the changing of the way a system functions goes beyond having people's hearts change. One of the things that we love to really emphasize in People's Institute is the task of changing is organizing. The organizing to change the way institutions function, and that's more than education. It's more than feeling. It's more than observing. It's changing the way that institutions are structured. It's some of you in the original question I asked about definition of racism, some of you use the word power. That told me that some of you have been influenced by People's Institute or similar analysis. Because power is the ability to have an institution redefine itself, and we're just beginning to get into that. Dr. William Barber talks about we're heading for the third Reconstruction period. The first Reconstruction period was the time following the end of slavery. The second Reconstruction period was the Civil Rights Movement. But racism keeps reinventing itself, and to be able to look at how racism it's been reinventing itself since the Civil Rights Movement leads you to the concepts of systemic change that we've never been to before. And so we're all having to rethink what change is about. We used to think it was just simply making people love each other, hold hands and sit around a circle and sing Kumbaya together. But we're now realizing that the structures of systems and institutions is the way is how power is manifested, and that makes the organizing process reinvent itself. We can't get into that in a short time today, but the building of a common analysis of racism has got to produce the ability to a common set of changes. There's three basic pieces of an institution that and systems that need to be looked at from an anti-racist perspective, and that is the racial identity, the race-based identity, race-based culture, and race-based history. And they're the three places where we need to go to for change that redefines the nature of an institution itself. Race-based identity takes us back to my original question of defining racism. The one thing I did not hear from the definitions that you gave is a challenging of the concept of race itself. It's not a matter of equal races. It's a matter of the elimination of race. The racial identity, race-based culture, race-based history creates this structure in our society that is race-based, and race is in itself an illusion. Race does not have a legitimate presence. When racism is overcome, race will not exist. It's not a matter of equal races. It's a matter of the end of race that we need to be thinking about. Respond to that.
Dean has a response.
I have, yeah, I used to believe that, and now I'm really questioning that. I wonder if anthropologically that is possible. And I tell you why. We throw a quick story. A couple of years ago, I visited the Falklands, and I visited these amazing colonies of penguins. And there were three kinds of penguins, all living together, close by, but in their own little circles. And they never crossed each other's circles. And it really stunned me, because I immediately thought about human beings. They were just 15, 20 feet, their little colonies were 15 or 20 feet away from each other. But there was no social intermingling. And I thought, oh my God.
No, I need you to take that one more step and help me to understand how penguins are like people.
We're all, they're birds. We're animals. Okay. I'm just wondering if there is a biological factor that makes us inherently suspicious and frightened of the different. That's what I mean. And there have been some psychological studies on babies that show that babies children below the age of 6 months have either a positive or negative reaction when they see faces that are very different from those of their parents. Now, you can turn that around and say during slavery, the white baby who on the moment after birth goes to the breast of the Black mammy loses her fear of difference very quickly, because that's sustenance. But there have been some interesting studies that say that as human beings, we have an innate fear or maybe negative reaction. I don't know, I'm just throwing that out.
One of the terms that we use in building a common analysis of racism is internalization of racial oppression. And that is how we get our racial identities and how they control us. and that you've introduced a very important concept in what you just said. From the moment we're born, the moment we're born, we get a racial identity assigned to us, and that racial identity becomes the basis by which we will be oriented to life. We learn to, we get assigned to a racial group, and we learn values and identities and associations that make us comfortable with our group and uncomfortable with other groups. But all of that is, I believe, is very important that we know that is an arbitrary assignment, and the internalization of racial oppression creates internalized sense of inferiority of people of color and superiority to white people, and that creates then the penguin behavior. But that is assigned to us in a process, according to child psychologists, that the foundations for that association with one group and disassociation with other groups is complete by the time we're 3 to 4 years old. The foundation is in place, and it's that foundation we have to go to organize the conscious identity of racial identity, culture, and history that challenges the very idea of race, and not just simply the superiority and the inferiority, but race identity itself. And that's an area we're just really beginning to get into, but it creates inside of us that racial identity that racism is built on. So I would only agree partially with what you said. I think that I'm not sure what it has to do with penguins, but with people, we do that association, and we do that orientation, and we create the identification with our own racial group, and that imprisons all of us. It's not just people of color who are imprisoned by racism. The internalized racial superiority is a prison for white people. And it's that disassociation that needs to take place from the moment we're born.
Joe, we got a couple of questions.
I think it was Myrna, Tanya, and now AJ.
Yes, I just wanted to jump in because this conversation is very very interesting, and I've had that thought as well, Dr. Usher, and with all due respect, I do want to say that that's kind of like, how do I say this? Like, let me just straight talk it, okay? Like, who cares? I'm not concerned about who wants to have Thanksgiving with me and who wants to be my friend, and and half my friends are of a different race and half my family is of a different race, okay? And I still feel that way. But you don't have to be my friend. This is what I explain to people. I don't understand, me personally, the whole pronoun thing that's going on. But one thing I know for sure is that I am for everybody to have the right to live how they want to live and call themselves what they want to call themselves and have respect in the society. I don't necessarily have to go around changing my pronouns, but I do respect those people. And I feel people that do, right? And so it's like when we talk about like, do people want to commingle? I mean, that has nothing to do with, does my nephew have a chance in this country to be able to walk down the street without somebody shooting him because they're scared? So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. AJ?
Tanya? Oh, okay. Tanya's.
Mine is more of a comment, and I did have to step away and take a phone call. So if y'all have covered this, excuse me for being repetitive. Is race and racism, isn't it a learned behavior? And the reason I asked that, so my daughter's 33. So when she was, just born, she's about 4 or 5, whatever. I got an apartment. I rented the 2nd floor of a house. The 1st floor was a Puerto Rican family. The 3rd floor, the basement was an El Salvadorian family. Outside, I'm looking out, my daughter's playing in the yard. So the little El Salvadorian kid, little Puerto Rican kid, the little white kid. There was like 4 or 5 different nationalities. They didn't see color. They were just kids playing. Isn't it when the adults or the older generation put that on them, they don't come out the womb like that. That's my question or comment.
Well, just to catch you up with your having been out for a phone call, is that we did make comments. I did make comments about that, and you just expanded on it. But very similarly, that I'm trying to remember the language you just used.
He was talking about race and racism being a learned behavior.
That learned behavior is the orientation that happens to every person. But it's not just individual. We get assigned to groups, and that our orientation to life is based upon our identification with the group that we are comfortable with, and are mistrustful of the groups that we're not assigned to. So yes, that is a collected corporate orientation to life that we all get, and it's in place, very deeply inside of us by the time we're 4 years old.
So we have one more question, and then I want to we have about 20 minutes left in this conversation. Tanya, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to make a comment. When I gave my definition of racism, I purposely did not use the word race. I did use a shortcut word. I used the word white-bodied, because everyone knew what I meant as soon as I said that. And the other thing is, I talked about it in terms of actually addressing what Adine was saying about the penguins. It is a problem with, Resma Menican calls it a problem with species identification. The white-bodied people are viewed as human and everyone else is not. You wouldn't do the things that are done to people if you thought they were human, that are done to them. You would not shoot a person walking down the street just because you were taught to be afraid of them if you thought they were a human being. You would not do that. And I want to be clear about that we are living in a state of terrorism, and some of us are not at physical risk, but I'll use the religious term soul, but our souls are at deep risk at all times. Our humanity, in terms of what we want humanity to be, is at deep risk because of this inability to recognize the other people are the same species. The same thing, a human being. There's only one human being. There's lots of different kinds of penguins, but there's only one human being. And if we can't get that going, you know, I don't know that that we deserve to be the apex species on this planet.
Amen.
And I would only add to that that the countering of that is in part an intellectual recognition and an emotional recognition, but the systemic part of that is that the organizing of the world on the basis of those divisions becomes a means by which we're all held imprisoned into an identity, and to overcome that, as you're suggesting, requires more than just an intellectual recognition, but the building of systems, going to the level of systems where that is engendered and perpetuated, and redesigning the without the racial structure. We're relearning that on other levels, like gender, and there's lots of ways in which that orientation to life gets built inside of us, but it's really deeply buried about how the racial superiority and inferiority, the racial privilege and the racial power that is perpetuated systemically, and we get assigned to that group, and we inherit that group's values. So yes, I'm agreeing with what you said, but I think we need to build more on that. We're just beginning to learn about that.
So Joe and Nathan, I'm wondering how you would suggest that folks take this learning that you've offered up today. How would you suggest we apply it? What is it that you are? What is your call to action, if there is some? Would you like to have people share what they're up to, or how they might apply this? How would you like to take this for the next 15 minutes?
I have two things that I'd like to ask Nathan also to comment with regards to this. And I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I'm sure that was my fault. Sorry.
The starting point has got to be a common analysis. The starting point is our using common language and common understanding of how racism is structured, and if when we started off this conversation, each person gave their definition of racism, and symbolically we created for 30 people, 30 worlds, separate worlds that touch on each other, but do not build a common language, a common understanding, and then a common action. So a common analysis gives birth to organizing strategies, so that we're organizing for systemic change, not just simply intellectual or emotional or spiritual, but a much broader basis for common action. And with a common analysis, then, and as some of you probably already know, that the People's Institute uses a 2.5-day model, which we can build in 2.5 days, build a common framework for looking at racism structures, and a common analysis to build common organizing, because it's got to give birth to organizing for institutional and systemic change. If it doesn't do that, it's resting on unhealthy foundations of intellectual or spiritual or other basis. It doesn't have a common action to it. So common analysis gives birth to common organizing action, and that has to be focused on changing of systems and institutions.
That's Joe's phone.
Sorry,
The president calling.
Yeah, right.
All right, there you go.
Sorry about that. Nathan, do you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think Joe has hit on a number of different concepts and points that speaks to the People's Institute's set of anti-racist principles. He talked about, and he used the term internalized racial superiority and inferiority. And I think that's, in my time with the Institute, that's been one of the most dynamic and challenging anti-racist principles, because when we were talking about earlier about being socialized, you know, at the age of 3 or 4, we hold on to that and we go out into the world with this internalized idea that we are white and we're superior, or we're black, or we're people of color and we're inferior. And we have to always be working on that work, changing that internalized sort of lived or internalized socialized idea, you know, of ourselves. And so I think the individual has to be very clear that they've been racialized and what that means, how they carry that subconsciously, and how they go into an institution as an individual, and how they want to be able to come together and work with other individuals towards this that are also racialized. Some of that internalized racial stuff can actually kick up and disorganize our organizing. We have to be aware of that. We can get the common analysis, but then the next step is the organizing. And who's organizing it? Or who's organizing? It's us in the room. And as I said before, I'm not sure, Lane, if you've talked about some of PISAB's anti-racist organizing principles, but the concept of internalized racial inferiority and superiority is a big one, as well as learning how to build a network. You all are a group of people, and you could become a network of folks working together, because we've also learned that a part of racism, the internalization of racism, is to go out and be an individual and try to do it ourselves. And we've learned that when you go out as an individual, you will burn out quicker. You'll feel hopeless quicker. You'll be overwhelmed quicker, you know. And so if you're serious about doing this work, it's important that you do it together. Because, well, again, if you have a common analysis, it's like my doctors. I had a tumor removed from my brain not too long ago, and it made me feel comfortable that the EMS person, the nurse that received me, the nurse's doctor, and the doctor all had the same understanding of what it is I was dealing with. And so they all knew from what angle, all their perspective angles, they knew exactly what they needed to do. That, to me, was them finding out where their work was at. But they all would come back together and say, where are we at? How are we dealing with racism on this level of an institution or that level? And that's the kind of work that we're going to have to do. We have to be a bit like surgeons, you know, but work together from different angles at racism. As we heard earlier about how we identified systems and institutions, we want to get more clear about the difference between a system and an institution. We all want to have the same understanding of what that is and what it isn't. And then we want to figure out where in the institution, whether it be the personal level of an institution we want to do our work at, where it be the programs and the process, the programs and the services of an institution, we can do work there. Whether it be the constituents that we're working with, we can do work there. Whether it be the structure of the organization, we can do work there. But the goal really right now, to what Lane's point is, what do you want to do as in terms of next steps? And that could be taking the workshop, that could be organizing after the workshop, that could be getting a race analysis, a common analysis of what race is, where it comes from and how it persists. That could be gaining a set of anti-racist principles. Those could be some of your next steps. But doing it by yourself, and talking about it, as Joe referred, it could be just an intellectual and emotional experience that you just have with yourself, and nothing's being done though. So as you said, Tanya, earlier, it's just, I walk around as a Black man wondering if I'm going to get shot. So I've always got to be thinking about something to do. I need to be working on this for the rest of my life. Joe, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add another word that we haven't used yet, but you described, and that is the way in which we all become gatekeepers of our institution and of our systems, and that we need to be figuring out what is an anti-racist gatekeeper, because we're not persons who sit on the borderlines and don't take part. We're taking part of the shaping of our institutions and systems, and if we're not intentionally building anti-racist gatekeeper practices and organizing, we become functionaries of and gatekeepers of racism. And I'd like to also add one other thing. We're coming to a close pretty quickly on this, and then we've covered far too much for a short period of time, and so I apologize if some of the concepts we've only touched on and haven't gotten a chance to go deeper. And I really would suggest the People's Institute workshop, where you get 2.5 days to really build these concepts and see how they relate to each other. But what I'd like to close with is we haven't talked about the importance of our coming together as a religious group. There's lots of different religious points of view and lots of different religious identities. So I'm not suggesting one particular religion, but I am saying that there's a common thrust that we need to be building that gives our religious orientations the authority to send us to be doing this work. I like to say that there's 3 basic religious concepts that are common to almost all religions that make a path for us of doing anti-racism work. The first is that as opposed to the penguin illustration, that we're all part of the same family. We're part of the family of God, part of the family of that unifies us, and racism threatens to take us out of the family. Racism gives us the authority to kick each other out of the family. Racism gives us the concept of building, like the penguins, frameworks in which you don't cross over, and gives us false identities. But there's a common religious identity that that says that we're all brothers and sisters of and and siblings as part of the one family of the one creator, and that it's our separation that challenges us to celebrate and to build ourselves back into the family of God. The second concept is that our sacred stories have been stolen from us and used to support racism and other forms of oppression, and that we need to take back our stolen stories and to use those stories to rebuild our relationships with each other. And so to be rediscovering an anti-racist religious space gives us a powerful position to be doing anti-racism work. And then the third concept is that our religion is a calling to participate in that struggle. That we're called by God, and that we're carried by God into the struggle. And that struggle has been going on before us and will take place after us, that we're part of a multi-generational struggle that God has called us into and carries us into, and that our sisters and brothers and siblings of the past and the present and the future hold us to doing that. So that those three things are important to me as ways of expressing that all of us are called to use our religious commitments to become an anti-racist people, the anti-racist family of God, and then to be rebuilding our relationships on the basis that has the goal of eliminating race from our vocabulary and from our way of life. There's 1,000 ways in which our religion calls us to be doing this, and I think that fundamentally that has to become the foundation. We can create a foundation that makes us into an anti-racist people.
Joe, I'm going to remind you of time, okay? Because you said you had to be at your next appointment.
And it just turned to 1:25, so I thank you for the brief time together. Look forward to doing it in ways in which we can go much deeper.
Thank you, Joe. I want to ask Nathan if you can stay on, because there's a question in the chat that I want to make sure gets addressed. Thank you so much, Joseph Barndt. And if you're interested, Joseph Barndt has written many books on anti-racism. This man is extremely learned and extremely well respected in movements, and so you want to look him up.
And a new book coming out in January called Deconstructing Racism.
Is it available anywhere yet, Joe?
Yes, you can buy it on Amazon already today.
All right, Deconstructing Racism by Reverend Joseph Barndt. Thank you so much.
Barbara Major.
And Barbara.
All right, Joe.
And Barbara Major. Yes.
All right. Barbara's been here before. Thank you so much, Joe.
Thank you all very much.
So Nathan, I just want to make sure, Gretchen put in the chat, while Joe was speaking, does that mean that there's no room for atheists, for our atheist brothers and sisters in the movement? And of course, that is not what he is saying, right?
No.
And knowing that Race Talk Revolution we're not a religious group, but we very much believe in the commonality and the common thread of humanity, right? And that as we are all spiritual beings, right? So just want to give you a moment to address that for a second, and then
I mean, briefly, just what you said. Yeah, it's not exclusive. another way to look at it is just that, you know, do you have faith that we have purpose and place on this planet that is of good nature? And that faith, does it drive you to strive and live, you know, for purpose and place, unified purpose and place for humanity, you know? So does your spirit, if you're a spiritual person, a person of faith, a person of God, a religious practitioner, either one, you know, in general, do you see a place where we all can be here in peace? And if that is so, then is your work towards anti-racist, your anti-racist work, is it rooted in that? Are you coming from a place of faith, a deep love in humanity? You know, so I think that speaks to the heart of the coalition itself, is that we're doing this work because it's spiritual work. It's about, I think someone said the word soul, working with the soul, working with the spirits, and we're definitely aligned with that. So you can be of any kind of belief. You can be an atheist. I'm sure that you believe that we all need to be here for a common good purpose and reason. So is that Sandy Barnaby? Somebody put something in the last chat? Hey.
Yes, Sandy says, I am concerned about how our faith creates division and maintains oppression of other groups, and for sure that is we are indeed, we are human people socialized to be divisive, unfortunately. And I would love to have that conversation, but we cannot have it today because our time is up. We do intend to bring some other forums where we could be talking about religion, faith, division. As Sandy knows, we are having, well, as everybody knows, there is increased anti-Semitism happening globally, and anti-Black sentiment does not seem to be waning, if you ask me. So there is a lot to continue to discuss. Nathan, I just want to thank you for your time and the work that you do with the Anti-Racist Coalition, and I thank you very much.
Yes, of course, thanks.
And that also, is there a particular call to action that you'd like to leave people with, Nathan?
No, I think that if you haven't really spent some time with those anti-racist principles, which you put in the chat, right? Did I see that?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
No, that you need to go to PISAB.org, PISAB.org.
Okay.
I don't have those principles available right now, but that is something to look at to see how they resonate for you. I also absolutely continue to emphasize the importance of continuing to be educated, and the Undoing Racism workshop is kind of the flagship of anti-racism education. If you have not done the Undoing Racism workshop, please do look at how to get there. All of the trainings are virtual right now. They are very accessible, and they will change your life. And I, for one, have done it more than once, and cannot recommend it more highly.
They're just real quickly, the workshops, there's some that are in person, so there's a little bit of options sometime right now. We're just kind of filling COVID out, but if those folks feel comfortable going in person, that's an option. But yeah, look at those, and Sandy just put the workshops in your area, a link to that if you're looking for workshops. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you, Sandy. PISAB.org/workshops-in-your-area. Thank you so much. Folks, thank you for another great show. We're going to just meet next week just to kind of have a pre-Thanksgiving conversation. And I hope you will come. We're going to talk about what we have learned, what we have still to learn, what we'd like to see happen in the world, and kind of talk about what we are grateful for. One of the things that I'm grateful for is all of you, but also my co-host, AJ Woodson. AJ, how can people follow you, sir?
Thank you. blackwestchester.com. And you can find me on any social media at Black Westchester. And you could find my book available on Amazon. Westchester, the origin story.
Thank you so much. We are also going to be expanding. We're going to be partnering with a community organization here local in Westchester to bring you a series of conversations about the intersectionality between race, ethnicity, and the arts. That is a special link for that, and a special time. So I will be sending out an email blast about that, so stay tuned. And again, if you know an individual or organization who you'd like us to feature on Race Talk, please let me know. And you can email me at info@racetalkrevolution.com, or use my personal information, lcobb@prodigy.net. Everybody, we love you much. All right. Take care. Be safe, everybody. Take some time off. I know you were working hard for the election. All right. Rest, self-care, and we'll see you next week. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Nathan.